Okay, so today we're going to get into the psychology behind the novel KatsuaI Itadaki Joshi Riri-chan. Now, this is a work of fiction, but it's actually based on a real-life case, and it paints this incredibly stark picture of a young woman's downward spiral, all fueled by loneliness and a really desperate need for validation in our modern world.
So this whole story really comes down to one word, KatsuaI. This isn't just, wanting to be loved. This is a deep, painful craving for it. The best way to think about it is like an unquenchable thirst for affection. It perfectly describes that giant hole at the very core of our main character, Riri-chan.
So where does a desperate thirst like that even come from? Well, to really get what's driving her, we have to go all the way back to the beginning. It really all starts in her childhood.
And the story's really clear about this. Riri grew up feeling completely and fundamentally unloved by her mother. She never got that basic feeling of acceptance at home. And that absence of affection created this profound void, this hole in her heart that she's going to spend the rest of her life trying to fill.
And this one feeling, this one thought, becomes her absolute core motivation. It's like she's starving. This single sentence is basically the engine driving every single choice she makes from here on out. It's not just a wish, it's a desperate, almost primal need. So the way she tries to fill that void, it's not what you'd expect. She doesn't look for a real loving relationship. What she's actually craving is what you could call pseudo-intimacy. She just wants someone, anyone, to confirm she exists, to need her unconditionally. And she finds that the quickest way to get this is through something called papakatsu, which is basically compensated dating. And this is where things really start to go off the rails for her. And this wasn't just some casual thing for her. She takes this whole idea and turns it into an art form, a full-blown performance. She becomes a master performer, creating this whole persona of an Itadaki Joshi, which you can think of as a sugar baby. She got incredibly good at playing a very specific role. It was all about building this image of the ideal girlfriend for a certain kind of man. She'd project this image of being cute and fragile, drop hints about how difficult her life was, and basically create a story that made these men feel like they were her knight in shining armor, that they had to rescue her.
And this is what's so wild, this huge gap between her reality and their perception of her. For Riri, this whole thing was a survival tactic, a way to feel like she was worth something. But for the men, it was a total romantic fantasy. They weren't seeing her at all. They were seeing a character they desperately wanted to believe in.
Now this is maybe the most crucial part to understanding her psychology. We learned she wasn't just being cynical or lying for the sake of it. She genuinely believed this. In her mind, if someone needed her, even if they were paying for it, that was stone-cold proof that she had value as a person. And that's exactly why she felt so little guilt about taking their money.
But here's the thing, this was never a one-way street. It wasn't just a simple case of a predator and her prey. It was way more complicated than that. It was a relationship built on a shared, deeply human need for some kind of connection. And this whole situation forces us to ask a really uncomfortable question, one the book itself brings up. When you have two lonely people who find a way to meet each other's needs, even in this messed up way, who's really at fault?
See, the men she targeted weren't just random guys with money. They were also victims in their own right. Lonely, completely stressed out from work, stuck in bad marriages, and worried about getting older. They were looking for an escape, and they were drawn to the comforting voice and the persona that Riri was selling.
And when you lay it all out like this, you can really see what the story calls a codependent accomplice relationship. It's a transaction, right? Riri gives them the fantasy of being a hero, of being needed. In return, the men give her money and support. She gets to feel valuable for a moment, and they get to escape their own lives. Both sides are giving something, and both sides are getting something they desperately want.
But a world that's built on a performance, on a fragile lie, well, it was never going to last. It was really only a matter of time before the whole thing came crashing down.
And it didn't just happen all at once. It was more like a slow-motion collapse. First, one of her biggest financial supporters goes broke and starts talking. Then, the sheer mental weight of keeping up the lies, the constant performance, it just starts to crush her. And finally, her actions escalate to the point where the police get involved.
You'd think her arrest would be this huge, dramatic scene, right? But the book portrays it as the total opposite. It's quiet, it's mundane, it's almost dry. There's no big showdown. Reality just sort of breaks through the fantasy, and Riri herself seems genuinely confused, like she can't even process that she's done something wrong in the eyes of the law.
So after all of that, what are we left with?
After the performance is over and the curtain comes down, what's the big takeaway from this whole modern tragedy?
Well, once she's in that interrogation room, with no phone, no social media, no audience, the carefully built persona of Riri-chan just completely disintegrates. For the very first time, she is completely alone, forced to face a reality where no one is coming to save her.
And when everything else is stripped away, her last words revealed the truth. It's not the confession of some criminal mastermind. It's the raw, childlike cry that was at her core the entire time. It's the voice of that little girl who never felt loved, who was still just trying to fill that hole in her heart.
But the story gives us one last chilling detail. The epilogue shows that this cycle of loneliness and validation seeking, it doesn't just stop with her. We see one of the men, even after everything that happened, still scrolling through her old social media profile. The thirst, the KatsuaI, for both the person selling the fantasy and the person buying it just doesn't go away. And that ultimately leaves us with this final, really tough question. The story paints Riri as a kind of monster, sure, but a monster that was created by a deep lack of love and the crushing loneliness of our world. And it makes you wonder, was she just a villain, or was she a tragic product of a world that failed to give her the one thing she ever really wanted?